All right, so we're here with Ed Waddell. Ed's a candidate for Cheyenne City Council in Ward 2. Welcome, Ed. Glad to have you here today.
Thank you, Brian. Glad to be here.
I'm Brian Martin, and the managing editor here at the Wyoming Tribune Eagle.
Bob Feck, Cheyenne Animal Shelter.
Nice to meet you, Bob.
Again, welcome, Ed, and thanks for running for City Council. What specific issues or concerns caused you to run for council this year?
Well, nothing specific. I mean, I was asked to run by a friend of mine, and suggested that I run, and I thought about it, and I realized that, yeah, with my background, I have the skills and experience needed for the job. The job calls for passing ordinances and referendum related to development in the city. And I have a lot of background in that. I'm a city planner by trade, have been for many years. I was also an Air Force officer. So I bring a perspective to it that I think would be useful. And I understand the impacts of development. And in Ward 2, that's the issue. We have a lot of development taking place. And I understand how it works. I know the impacts of it. I've calculated the impacts of it. So I think I could bring those technocratic skills to the job and help make good decisions on the council.
You kind of answered the second question in the same at the same time, which was what qualifications you bring to the table. Any other specific qualifications, and what what's your job now? What are you doing?
Well, right now I'm a community planner. I work for Western Research and Development. It's a engineering company here in Cheyenne. We do all kinds of engineering, surveying, planning work. And in the process of that, I've written a number of proposals for the city, studying different aspects of development proposals on the south side and north side, street improvements. And so in the process, I've become very familiar with the issues and concerns of Ward 2 and the city in general. And that's, I think, been helpful. And it would be helpful in this job. Several years of studying city developments helps a lot.
Have you been around Cheyenne a long time? Or
6 years.
6 years.
Okay. Yeah. I was a service brat. I've lived in 18 different cities.
So, move around a lot.
Yeah. So it's so every place I see the American flag is home. And this is the first one I've ever really chosen as my home. So it's a nice change of pace. I think it has a lot of potential to be a really great city.
So were you last stationed at F.E. Warren and then you decided to stay, or?
Well, I was a civilian employee at F.E. Warren. My last military assignment was at Wurtsmith Air Force Base, which no longer exists. But I was hired out of Texas to come out and work as the community planning supervisor at Warren Air Force Base, which wasn't really like my background. My background is in transportation mostly, and theirs was more of a environmental clearance position. So it really wasn't a good fit for me. But my current job's a lot more fun.
Ed, what do you believe is the biggest challenge facing the city of Cheyenne? And then once you've named the biggest challenge, name one or two others for us.
Probably the biggest challenge right now is declining revenue and aging infrastructure. If the city is going to be able to maintain and build new infrastructure, they're going to need money to do that. The federal gas tax hasn't been increased since 1994, so the purchasing power of that is inflated away. The city budget has declined for the last several years. It's about a $50 million budget. I think it's down to 47, 48 now. And as revenue declines, it's obviously more and more difficult to make the expenditures that the city needs to maintain itself. I used to work for Michigan DOT, and I watched what happened to the city of Detroit as they neglected maintenance on their infrastructure. The results have been disastrous. So that's not the kind of thing that a city can do for very long and hope to be viable. It's just not a good idea. So,
what are one or two other challenges the city faces?
I think smart development is going to be a big issue. As you get new neighborhoods built, they each generate a lot of traffic, and that traffic is going to impact the existing neighborhoods. So as we develop, we need to make sure that we develop in such a way that it doesn't have a negative impact on our existing neighborhoods. Traffic is just one obvious example, but the other aspect is that when you put more traffic into an intersection that wasn't designed for it, you can hurt somebody or worse. And we need to anticipate those things before they happen so that we don't hurt members of the community. We don't want people in the hospital unnecessarily. So that, I think, would be an important issue. As everybody knows, we have some flooding problems. We've done a lot to improve that. I think we can do more, make sure that people are safe from that kind of problem. And then I think probably the last big challenge would be the maintenance and upkeep of the existing neighborhoods. Many of them are aging. The town was founded in the late 1860s, so there's a lot of very old infrastructure that needs to be worked on. So my approach to that would be to look for an infrastructure maintenance program. Asset management is called these days, where you get a complete inventory of all the different infrastructure the city owns, how old it is, where it is, and develop a program for gradual replacement. And you'd have to figure out a budget for doing that over time. So the first thing to do is identify the problem, and then come up with a systematic way of addressing it.
Ed, can you describe your vision for Cheyenne?
I think it could be a great, great city. I mean, it's the first real city in the Mountain West. It's the northernmost city in the Front Range, and it has a lot of space. As the country grows, I think we'll see a lot more people here. The forecast for the year 2050, last I heard, was 572 million people, and I don't think they're all going to Phoenix or New York City. We're going to have a lot more here. All you got to do is look down I-25, and you can see what's pointed our way. Look what's happened to Wellington in the last decade or so. And that market has finally reached Cheyenne. So we need to be smart about how we allow the city to grow. And I see the city becoming a really great place. I could see it, someday, probably after I'm gone, 250,000 people or more living in this metropolitan area. And I'd like to make sure that they have a habitable city to enjoy.
What does that look like in terms of amenities, or what do you see that the community needs that Cheyenne doesn't have right now?
Well, the first thing is to maintain what it has. With the declining revenues, that's going to be increasingly difficult. So some solution to that needs to be derived. And in addition, I've heard constituents say, well, there's nothing for kids to do in the neighborhood. One thing might be community centers and parks and so on, so that the kids have a place to go in the summertime or after school to enjoy themselves and have a learning experience and so on. Stay out of trouble also. Right now, we don't really have any neighborhood centers where kids can go for those sorts of things. So that would be one aspect.
So do you prefer smaller neighborhood community centers versus one large rec center?
Well, it needs to be within walking distance. Kids don't have cars. We can't rely on cars to transport everybody clear across town. I think the city-wide centers are very important. The pool over in Lions Park is a terrific facility, but it'd be hard for a sixth grader in the east side of Ward 2 to get there after school conveniently. So some kind of community focal point would be good. The city of Laramie has similar treatments. They have local parks, regional parks, and citywide parks, that each perform different functions. based on the size of the neighborhood. If you have 100 people, or 500 people, or 1,000 people, you can have different types of facilities. So, what I'd like to see is a focus on the right size of treatment for the neighborhood scale.
Ed, what do you believe is the future of downtown, and what support do you have for the downtown core project and the West Edge project?
Well, the West Edge project, I'm very familiar with. I wrote a proposal to do some work on it. I think the idea of the catalysts is a great idea. Some of the buildings down there, are a little scary looking, but they could be turned around and made into something really fantastic. I've seen other cities do similar things with old powerhouses and so on. The city of, for instance, I saw one in Lansing, Michigan. They had taken their old power plant, taken the smokestack off, and put an office complex in it. It was really nice. Those old buildings were brick, beautifully done by some real artisans, the kind we don't have anymore. So, preserving those and restoring them to good condition and making them attractive catalysts for development, I think is a great idea. Downtowns all over the country are having a hard time because the original focus of the downtown here was the railroad stations, which no longer function. They brought in thousands of pedestrians every day who served as customers for all those businesses and all the hotels downtown. But that no longer exists. So the problem is, how do you get enough people in with the current transportation system to make it a viable commercial activity and support all that real estate? Plus you got the problem of infrastructure aging. I think Fort Collins has done a really good job of addressing that. We've worked with some landscape architects who have done some alleyway renovations. And if you look at the alleyways in Cheyenne, there's some really interesting spaces and shapes that could be really nice, but they're, like I said, they're kind of scary. They're full of dumpsters and, electrical transformers and kind of stuff that you really don't want to hang around. But clean that up and make it more attractive spaces, we could attract some more people to downtown and make commercial activity more viable. I think that's the key, is to make it the kind of place people want to go to.
So how do you do that? How do you get that dumpster out of the alley? Because where else are they going to put their stuff? How do you provide lighting? How do you
Well, I'm not saying it's easy. I mean, it requires funding. The Downtown Development Authority would have to be well funded in order to make some of those things happen. That's how Fort Collins did theirs, is through their Downtown Development Authority. The obvious problem is always money, but it requires a community commitment and investment. I think the downtown area benefits everyone in town, not just the downtown business owners, but all of us, because we have a lot of hotels, a lot of restaurants, those support the economy. Even if they're not in the downtown, they still benefit from attracting new visitors to downtown Cheyenne. So by attracting those visitors, those folks in the outlying areas also benefit through the employment spinoff. And so, having the entire community contribute to it makes a lot of sense. So that's my approach to that, I guess.
Okay, so Ed, I want to follow up on this just a little bit, please.
Sure.
You said the DDA would be instrumental in that.
Yes.
So as a city councilman, how would you get the DDA to do that?
Well, we need to get funding for them, support them financially. The current city council has been doing that. I think that's a great idea. And we need to continue that program. The Frontier Days attracts a lot of people to Cheyenne, and that's their impression. They come to downtown and they say, what's there? We need to make that impression a good one. Some of those people who come here are business owners from other communities. They may be looking for a place to locate a business. We want them to see Cheyenne as that place where they want to go to locate that business. If they look at Laramie versus Cheyenne, They may see something in Laramie they prefer, or here. The city of Laramie recently set up a technology park with lots ready to go for new developers to show up. That's something we need to make sure that we have, is the right kind of developable lots for businesses when they show up in town.
And one of the issues with downtown for a while has been filling the hole on Lincoln Way, and the current proposal, of course, is to build the Children's Museum there. Now there's talk about using taxpayer money to get that project built. How do you feel about the use of taxpayer money for amenities like the Children's Museum?
Well, it's a good investment in the community. As I said, people come to Cheyenne and they have a first impression. That was one of my first impressions when I moved here 6 years ago. There's a hole in the ground in downtown. And then 3 years later, there was still a hole in the ground in downtown. And I've never seen a place where a hole in the ground would stay there that long. So I'm glad to see something's being done about it. It's important that the city support those kinds of investments. The impression that visitors get is, as I said, key to economic development. If the place looks shabby, if there's a hole in the ground, it doesn't create the impression that we want for the city. So yeah, the financial support for redevelopment in the downtown area makes a lot of sense for the city. Another case in point, in some cities, they have neighborhoods where the houses have begun to become dilapidated. The homeowners may be elderly. You can rely on charitable organizations like Habitat for Humanity to do those sorts of things. But the city as a whole, we can all chip in and help out in situations like that. The city of Lansing, Michigan, for example, put together a program where they would purchase homes, renovate them, historic homes, and then remarket them so that the city would actually renew itself. They would target specific locations. The investment was minimal. They were in the business of flipping whole neighborhoods, and the effect was powerful. That's something we could try here as well. If you could flip them and make money on them, and it doesn't end up costing the city anything. It's just a good investment in making the community a better place.
So as long as the voters support the Children's Museum using taxing themselves with a sales tax, you're supporting.
Absolutely, absolutely. Those are exactly the kind of things that we need in our downtown to make it a more attractive place for people to come visit. Visitors to our downtown are what keep the place going.
As you know, probably the city owns the Belvoir Ranch out to the west of town and
Yes.
southwest. And there's talk now about opening that up for recreational opportunities with some trails. If you were elected to the city council, how big a priority would that be for you to get the Belvoir open to public access?
Depends on available funding and whether we can make any money on it. The Belvoir Ranch, I think the city came up with a plan for it back in 2008. It's a terrific plan. It's just been languishing, waiting for funding for it to happen. The Big Hole is a fantastic opportunity there in the southern part of the Belvoir Ranch to have hiking and perhaps a campground in there that could perhaps generate a little bit of revenue for the city. And it also connects up with the Red Mountain open space south of the state line. So there'd be opportunities there to coordinate with Larimer County and the city of Fort Collins on a regional trail network. Wyoming depends to a great extent on tourism, even more so with the decline in the fossil fuels industry recently. So the kinds of amenities that attract tourists specifically to our area are really important. The hotel and restaurant industry is large in our community, larger than it is in a typical American community. And that contributes a lot of service sector employment to the community. And that's important. We need to attract also let's see, there were two other sectors I was looking at. The science and engineering sector, we're a little bit behind the country in terms of employment percentage. Also, the medical and medical support area. Those are the kinds of industries that we could see growth in, but we need to be able to attract those folks here to locate facilities and to live here. So those are two things that I would look at. But as far as Belvoir Ranch, I think, yes, we should support that. As I said, the difficulty is going to be to support that while revenues are declining for the city. We need to find revenue sources to make that happen. That would be my response on that.
Speaking of declining revenues, what would be your priorities as a member of the city council for the budget and savings? What things do you think the city should be spending its money on, and how much should it be saving?
That's a tough question. I mean, I would have to really delve into the budget in a lot more detail than I have, to be frank. That would be one of my first things that I would do. But as far as budget priorities, I did notice that we have an unusually large proportion of employment in police and fire. So I think the raises to the police and to the police department are a good idea, and a reduction in the number of employees would be helpful. That could be done through attrition. But ultimately, as the city grows, we can't shrink the budget. The budget needs to grow with the city in order to maintain, the existing infrastructure. One of the things I've worked on recently is renovation of the Yellowstone Village Association condo complex. The condominiums were 33 years old. They hadn't been maintained properly, and they didn't have a plan in place for restoring them. So I looked at the priorities for the condominiums. We set up a plan for a systematic approach to each building, set up priorities for which building would be built first, repaired first, and made sure we had a budget revenue stream coming in to make that happen. Right? But the key is to make sure that you've identified what are your expenditures going to be, realistically, practically, systematically, and then you have to figure out how you're going to budget in order to make that happen. You can't just let it become Detroit. It has to be maintained, and you have to make sure you have the revenue stream coming in to do that. It's a complex set of calculations that I have not yet done, but the city staff would do that, and the council would support them in that effort.
The next sixth penny ballot will be coming up, looks like in May of next year. What would your priorities be? What are your personal priorities for the sixth penny ballot? What projects would you like to see listed on it?
Well, general street repairs and maintenance would be important. A lot of people are very concerned about the condition of the roadways. The provision of neighborhood recreational opportunities. We need to figure out how we're going to pay for this recent raise to the city employees. We just got a 2.5% raise as the city's revenues are declining. But I think application of some of those monies toward the hole in downtown would be useful. There's gateway effects in different approaches to the community, where beautification of the approaches would be useful to create that impression that attracts new businesses and makes people want to locate here in Cheyenne. Would be a valuable thing to do. But I'm sure there's many other worthy things to spend money on.
So my belief is that the purpose of government is to provide services to the community that they cannot provide normally for themselves. So in your own mind, have you defined what are the essential government services, second tier services, third tier services?
Well, there's the obvious ones come up. Water and sewer are pretty critical. I heard an individual advocate that we had to do away with that, have everybody have their own septic tank. I thought, no, that wouldn't be a good idea. I used to own a septic tank, and I'm glad I don't anymore. But so yeah, sewer and water utilities, the obvious things, streets, all the physical infrastructure that are needed to support neighborhoods, have to be the number one thing that the city does. The support for kids, for making their lives pleasant, having a place to play, safety, security are key aspects. All of the standard things that cities supply all over the world, they're the same everywhere. Those are the key things. So I don't know that you would set priorities for police versus trash removal or anything else. One thing that I think is important is the cost of trash has gone up, and we need to figure out a long-term solution to that. The Belvoir Ranch is proposing a new landfill. That's an issue that needs to be dealt with. One thing that we might look at is ways to reduce our solid waste stream. Some other communities have done things like increase their plastics recycling to all varieties of plastic, which is a complicated thing to do. We could increase our composting facilities, make sure that that sort of thing isn't going into the landfill any more than absolutely necessary. It just takes up space and it doesn't need to be in there. Those are the kinds of things we could look at in order to save some money on the different aspects that the city provides.
And we only have 3 or 4 more minutes, but I wanted to ask you about the proposed anti-discrimination ordinance and whether you think that's something that the Cheyenne City Council should pass.
Yes. There's no room for discrimination in society anymore. We've been through that. The terrible incident over in Laramie a few years ago brought that to the forefront statewide, and I think it's time we just ended discrimination. There's no need for it. It doesn't have any place in modern society. We're a multicultural, multi-ethnic society, and it's time to move on from that. My family's been here for 16 generations. We've seen everything, and it's time to put a stop to it. They used to burn witches at the stake, which we found out was a bad idea. And we can end that whole way of thinking. I don't know that we can ever get rid of it entirely, but an anti-discrimination ordinance would be a step in the right direction, just to let everybody know we don't vote for this.
Some fifth penny sales tax money and also some general fund money from the city of Cheyenne and from Laramie County goes to a series of nonprofits through the United Way. Mm-hmm. Do you have thoughts on the fact that we fund some of those nonprofit organizations?
Frankly, I was not aware of that till this very moment, and I haven't given it any consideration at all. So I'd have to think about it. I hope that's not a bad answer, but some things I have to think about.
I think we've covered the questions that we wanted to get to. Ed, do you have any other issues or anything that you'd like to bring up before we wrap up?
Well, I think one thing that probably makes me different from other city council members is I'm a former Air Force officer, and I did that for 8 years. Took an oath to the Constitution of the United States, and I still believe it. I read every word of that thing, and I believe it. We also had this thing called the Honor Code, which was, I will not lie, cheat, steal, or tolerate those who do. And I still believe that. If you want somebody you can trust, if you want somebody who will steadfastly work against any form of corruption, you got it. I won't tolerate it. So, that's who I am. That's where I come from. And like I said, I think I can bring the technical expertise to the development aspect that would be a very useful adjunct on the Public Services Committee. They make decisions about city development and so on. I know it well. I've studied it a long time.
Thanks for your time. Thanks for being here with us.
I'm glad I came. You guys have been real nice to me. I was afraid they were going to try and generate controversy.